I'm grateful my mother told me I was a mistake. The voicemail notification sat on my phone for 3 days before I finally pressed play. I knew it was her. Nobody else had that particular brand of desperation mixed with entitlement in their voice, even in a 30-second recording. David, it's your mother. I know we haven't spoken in, well, it's been a while. But I really need to talk to you. Please call me back. I deleted it immediately, just like I'd done with the previous 4 calls over the past month. But this time felt different. Maybe it was because I was sitting in my corner office on the 42nd floor of the Meridian building, looking out at a city where I built something she said I'd never amount to. Or maybe it was because tomorrow marked exactly 10 years since I'd last seen her face. My assistant knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a privilege I'd granted only to Sarah after 3 years of proving she could read my moods better than a meteorologist reads storm patterns. The Jensen Group confirmed for Thursday, she said, setting down my coffee. And your interview with TechCrunch got moved to 3:30. Thanks. I picked up the coffee, inhaling the familiar Colombian blend. Sarah, do you ever think about the things that broke you before you became who you are now? She paused, probably wondering if this was another one of my philosophical tangents that would lead to some breakthrough product idea, or if I was actually asking. After a moment, she sat down across from my desk. Every day, she said simply. Why? I pulled up the call log on my phone, showing her the repeated entries from Linda Chen. I'd never been able to bring myself to program her number under Mom. She called again. Sarah knew the basics. Most people in my inner circle did, though I'd never gone into the gory details. They knew my mother had been difficult and that we were estranged. Corporate-friendly language for a relationship that had been scorched earth for a decade. You know what she told me the day I left for college? I said, staring at the phone. She said I was finally becoming someone else's problem. That she'd done her 18 years of penance for the mistake she made when she was 23. The mistake. That's what I've been called for as long as I could remember. Not David, not son, not even you. Just the mistake that ruined everything. She said I'd be back within a year, probably pregnant or arrested, because that's what happens to mistakes who think they're special. I laughed, but it came out hollow. I was 17, Sarah. 17 and carrying 2 suitcases and a full scholarship to Berkeley that I'd earned with a 4.2 GPA and test scores she never even asked about. Sarah waited. She'd learned not to fill my silences. I called her once during freshman year. Wanted to tell her I'd made Dean's List. She asked if I needed money, and when I said no, she said she had to go. I set the phone face down on my desk. That was November 15, 2014. Last time we spoke. The irony wasn't lost on me. In the decade since the conversation, I built Chin Digital Solutions from a dorm room project into a company worth $43 million. I employed 216 people across 4 offices. Forbes had called me the millennial mind behind tomorrow's marketing. And none of it would have happened if Linda Chen hadn't spent my childhood convincing me I was worthless. The success had started as spite, pure and simple. Every A+ in high school, every scholarship application, every 18-hour coding session in my dorm room, it was all fuel thrown on the fire she'd lit in my chest. The fire that whispered prove her wrong every time I wanted to quit. Sir. Sarah's voice pulled me back to the present. There's something else. She pulled out her tablet, and I could see the hesitation in the way she held it. Sarah only hesitated when she'd found something I wouldn't want to see. I did some research after you mentioned your mother last month. I hope that's okay, I was just worried about why she might be calling. She turned the screen toward me. David, she's been trying to reach you through the company website too. Our customer service team flagged it because she's been persistent. The screen showed a series of contact form submissions spanning 6 weeks. The timestamps told their own story, 2:47 a.m., 4:23 a.m., 1:15 a.m. Desperate hours. Asterisk, this is Linda Chen, David's mother. I need to speak with him urgently about a family matter. Asterisk. Asterisk, please, someone has to know how to reach David Chen directly. This is his mother and it's an emergency. Asterisk. Asterisk, I know David owns this company. I'm his mother. Something terrible has happened and he needs to know. Asterisk. The last one was from yesterday, asterisk, I'm dying. He has the right to know, even if he hates me. Asterisk. My coffee suddenly tasted like ash. Jesus. There's more. Sarah swiped to another screen. I may have crossed a line here, but I had Marcus run a background check. Marcus was our cybersecurity consultant, the kind of guy who could find your 3rd grade report card if you gave him 20 minutes and adequate motivation. The report was thorough. Linda Chen, age 51. Divorced from my stepfather Kevin 18 months ago, a marriage that had lasted 6 years, longer than anyone expected. She was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Riverside, working part-time at a Target. Medical bills from Riverside Community Hospital totaling $47,000. 3 maxed-out credit cards. A car repossession notice from February. And a diagnosis, stage 3 cervical cancer. The papers slipped from my hands. $43 million in the bank, and I was suddenly 17 again, standing in our kitchen while she screamed that I was bleeding the family dry by existing. When? I managed. Diagnosis was 4 months ago. She's been doing chemotherapy, but... Sarah's voice was gentler than I'd ever heard it. David, the medical records Marcus accessed, they're not good. Asterisk prognosis, 18 to 24 months with treatment. 6 to 8 months without, asterisk. The numbers swam in front of me. I'd built my entire adult life on numbers, on data, on metrics that meant something. Revenue growth, 340% year over year. Employee retention, 94%. Customer satisfaction, 4.8 out of 5 stars. But these numbers meant my mother was dying, and she'd been dying alone while I deleted her voicemails. There's one more thing, Sarah said quietly. She pulled up a real estate listing on her tablet. She lost the house, David. Your childhood home. It went into foreclosure 3 weeks ago. The house on Maple Street. The place where she told me I was mistake number 1 in a series of life-ruining decisions. where I'd hidden in my bedroom, building websites and dreaming of escape while she raged downstairs about everything I'd cost her. The listing price was $340,000. I made that in 6 weeks. My phone buzzed. Another call from Linda Chin. This time, I answered. Hello, Mom. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard her crying, soft, broken sounds I'd never heard from her before. David, she whispered. You answered. I have cancer, she said, and even though I'd already seen the medical records, hearing her say it made something crack inside my chest. I know. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Mom, You know. The crying stopped abruptly. How could you possibly know? I looked at Sarah, who was quietly gathering the papers from my desk, giving me privacy while staying close enough to intervene if needed. How do you explain to your dying mother that you've become successful enough to have people investigated? That you have resources she couldn't imagine? I had someone look into why you were calling. It sounded cold, even to me. The medical bills, the foreclosure, I know about all of it. Another long silence. Then, of course you do. You probably know more about my life right now than I do. There was something in her voice I couldn't identify. Not quite bitterness, not quite admiration. You always were too smart for your own good. Too smart for your own good, she'd said that to me when I was 12 and had corrected her math while she was balancing the checkbook. She'd slapped me across the face and told me that smart-ass kids end up alone because nobody likes a know-it-all. The house is gone, she continued. I tried to save it, David. I really did. But the medical bills, and Kevin left right after the diagnosis. Said he didn't sign up for this. She laughed, but it sounded more like choking. Funny thing is, I couldn't even blame him. Who wants to be tied to a dying woman with no money? I walked to my office window, looking down at the city spread below me. Somewhere out there, in a Target in Riverside, my mother was probably supposed to be working. Instead, she was in what I imagined was a cramped apartment, making the hardest phone call of her life. How bad is it? I asked. Stage 3. Could be worse, could be better. Her voice took on that matter-of-fact tone I remembered from childhood, the one she used when explaining why we couldn't afford new school clothes or why dinner was cereal again. 18 months if the treatment works. 6 months if it doesn't. And the treatment? Expensive. She was quiet for a moment. David, I'm not calling you for money. Yes, you are. The honesty hung between us like a blade. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Okay, yes. God, yes, I'm calling you for money. But not the way you think. Her voice cracked again. I saw the Forbes article. The millennial mind behind tomorrow's marketing. There was a photo of you in that expensive suit, standing in front of your building. You looked. What? Happy, she whispered. You looked happy, and I realized I'd never seen that expression on your face before. Not once in 18 years. Sarah had moved to the far corner of the office, but I could feel her listening. This conversation was going places I hadn't expected. The house, my mother continued, it's being auctioned next Friday. I called because I know how much you hated that place, but I also know it's where you learned to build things. You had that old computer in your bedroom, and you'd stay up all night working on those websites. Even when I yelled at you to turn off the lights, you kept going. She remembered. Somehow, through all the years of calling me a mistake, she'd been watching. I thought maybe you'd want to buy it. Not for me, she added quickly. For you. To do something better with it than what we did. The auction listing was still open on Sarah's tablet. 1247, Maple Street. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. The place where I'd learned that love was conditional and I'd never meet the conditions. Mom, I said slowly, what aren't you telling me? The silence stretched for nearly a minute. I could hear her breathing, shallow and irregular, probably from the chemo treatments. There's a girl, she finally said. A teenager. She reminds me of you. That wasn't what I'd expected. What? Her name is Jessica. She lives in the apartment below me with her grandmother. 17, just like you were when you left. Smart as hell, angry at the world, and convinced she's going to amount to nothing. My mother's voice grew stronger, more focused. She helps me carry groceries sometimes. Won't take money for it, but she'll sit and listen when I tell her stories about this ungrateful son who became successful despite his mother being a complete bitch. The word hit me like a physical blow. In 34 years, I'd never heard Linda Chin admit fault for anything. The grandmother, Rosa, she's raising Jessica alone. Parents died in a car crash when she was 14. Sound familiar? There was no self-pity in her voice, just stated facts. Jessica tested into UC San Diego with a full academic scholarship. Computer science, just like her hero. Her hero? You, David. I showed her that Forbes article. Told her about the company you built, about how you coded your way out of poverty. She has your old determination, that same fire in her eyes when people tell her she can't do something. I sat down heavily in my chair. Sarah looked up from across the room, concern written across her face. But here's the thing, my mother continued. Rosa had a stroke last month. She's in rehabilitation, and the insurance doesn't cover the extended care she needs. Jessica is about to give up her scholarship to get a full-time job and take care of her grandmother. She thinks she has to choose between her future and the only family she has left. The parallel wasn't lost on me. I'd made the opposite choice, I'd chosen my future and abandoned my family entirely. It had worked out for me, but I'd spent 10 years wondering what kind of person it made me. How much? I asked. For Rosa's care. About $60,000 would cover the next 2 years. But David, that's not why I'm telling you this. Her voice grew urgent. I'm telling you because I see what I did to you. How I made you feel like you had to choose between staying and surviving. Jessica shouldn't have to make that choice. My assistant was pulling up our charitable giving accounts on her laptop, probably already calculating how to make this work. $60,000 was nothing. I spent more than that on office coffee in a year. You said the house is being auctioned Friday? Yes. Starting bid is 240, but it'll probably go for close to listing. She paused. David, there's something else. Something I should have told you years ago. My chest tightened. What? You weren't a mistake. The words came out in a rush. I mean, you weren't planned, but you weren't a mistake. I called you that because I was 23 and terrified and your father left the moment he found out I was pregnant. I took all that fear and anger and put it on you, and that was unforgivable. I stared out at the city, processing words I'd waited 2 decades to hear. I was the mistake, David. I was the one who ruined everything, not you. Never you. Her voice broke completely now. And by the time I realized what I'd done, you were gone, and you'd built this incredible life, and I thought you were better off without me in it. Sarah had moved closer, close enough to catch me if this conversation knocked me over entirely. Mom, I said carefully, are you asking me to forgive you, or are you asking me to save you? Both, she whispered. God help me, both. The line went quiet except for her ragged breathing. I found myself gripping the phone so hard my knuckles had gone white. I need to think about this, I said finally. How long? The question came out sharp, desperate. David, I don't have the luxury of time anymore. Give me until Monday. It was Thursday now. 4 days to process 34 years of damage. Can you do that? The auction is Friday at 10 a.m. I'll handle the house, I said without thinking. The words just came out, automatic as breathing. But everything else. I need time. After I hung up, Sarah and I sat in silence for nearly 10 minutes. She'd ordered lunch at some point, but neither of us had touched the sandwiches growing stale on my desk. You're going to buy it, she said finally. It wasn't a question. The house? Yeah, probably. I pulled up my banking app, checking the balance in my liquid assets account. $2.3 million. More than enough to buy my childhood trauma and turn it into something else. The question is what happens after that. Sarah pulled up a new document on her laptop. I could draft a proposal. Set up a trust for the girl, Jessica, and her grandmother. Medical expenses, living costs, college funding. Keep your mother out of the financial picture entirely. It was a clean solution. Businesslike. Help the people who deserved it while maintaining boundaries with the one who damaged me. But something about it felt wrong, like trying to perform surgery with a sledgehammer. What if she's lying? I asked. What if this whole dying mother routine is just another manipulation? Marcus verified the medical records independently. Cross-referenced with 3 different databases. Sarah's fingers moved across her keyboard as she spoke. The cancer diagnosis is real. The financial situation is real. Even the story about Jessica checks out. I found her scholarship acceptance letter in the UC system database. She paused, then added more gently, the question isn't whether she's lying about the facts. It's whether her motivations are genuine. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, *Hi Mr. Chin. This is Jessica Martinez. Your mom gave me your number. I wanted to say thank you for being an inspiration. I hope someday I can build something amazing like you did, *. Attached was a screenshot of a coding project, a website designed for a nonprofit that helped elderly people navigate healthcare systems. The code was clean, efficient, elegant in its simplicity. It reminded me of my own work at 17, all raw talent and determination. Jesus, I muttered, showing Sarah the text. She's good, Sarah said, examining the code. Really good. This is graduate-level work. Another text came through, *. I know this is probably weird, getting a text from some random girl. Your mom talks about you a lot. She's really proud of you, even though she thinks she doesn't have the right to be. She keeps saying she broke something she can't fix, *. I set the phone down and walked to my window again. 42 floors below, people were living their lives, making choices, carrying their own complicated relationships with the people who'd shaped them. Sir. Sarah's voice had changed. There's something else Marcus found. Something I wasn't sure whether to tell you. At this point, just tell me everything. She turned her laptop screen toward me. It showed a social media profile for Linda Chen, barely used except for one album labeled David. Dozens of photos, screenshots of articles about my company, printed photos of me from college graduation that someone must have sent her, even a blurry picture of me walking into this very building that looked like it had been taken from across the street. She's been following your career, Sarah said softly. For years. The timestamps went back 7 years. Every major milestone, every press mention, every public appearance. She'd been watching from a distance, collecting proof of the success I'd built to spite her. My hands were shaking. I couldn't tell if it was from anger or something else entirely. The phone rang again. This time it was Marcus, our security consultant. David, we might have a problem. David, we might have a problem. Marcus's voice carried that particular edge he got when he'd found something that kept him awake at night. That background check on your mother, someone else has been digging into the same information. I put him on speaker so Sarah could hear. What do you mean someone else? Professional level search queries, all within the last 72 hours. Medical records, financial history, property records, the works. Whoever it is, they have serious resources and they're not trying very hard to hide their tracks. Sarah leaned forward. Corporate espionage. That was my first thought, but the search patterns are wrong. This isn't about Chin Digital Solutions. It's specifically about Linda Chen and her connection to David. Marcus paused, and I could hear keyboard clicking in the background. David, when's the last time you talked to Kevin Watanabe? My stepfather. I hadn't thought about him in months. I haven't spoken to Kevin since the divorce papers were filed. Why? Because he's the one running the searches. And based on what I'm seeing, he's not just curious about your mother's situation, he's building a case. The room felt like it was tilting slightly. A case for what? Hard to say without more information, but he's been in contact with at least 3 different law firms in the past month. The kind that specialize in estate planning and family disputes. More clicking. David, is there any chance your mother has assets she hasn't told you about? Sarah and I exchanged glances. According to everything we found, she's broke. Lost the house, maxed credit cards, medical debt. That's what I thought too, until I dug deeper. Marcus's voice grew more urgent. Your mother took out a life insurance policy 18 months ago. Right around the time she got divorced. $2 million, and based on what I can see from Kevin's searches, he thinks he's still the beneficiary. My coffee mug hit the desk harder than I'd intended, sending liquid splashing across the quarterly report Sarah had printed that morning. $2 million. Where the hell did she get the money for premiums on a policy that size? That's where it gets interesting. The premiums are being paid through something called the Chin Family Trust. David, did you know your mother set up a trust? No. The word came out flat, but inside I was spinning. I've never heard of any Chin Family Trust. Sarah was already pulling up legal databases on her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard with the efficiency of someone who'd spent 3 years managing my increasingly complicated business affairs. Found it, she said grimly. Established March 15, 2023. Linda Chen is listed as the primary trustee, with... She stopped, her face going pale. With what, Sarah? With you listed as the primary beneficiary and successor trustee. She turned the screen toward me. David, according to these documents, you're legally responsible for the trust's obligations if something happens to her. The document was dense with legal language, but the numbers were clear enough. The trust held the life insurance policy, but it also held something else, debt obligations totaling $340,000. The exact amount of the mortgage on the house that had just gone into foreclosure. She used the trust to try to save the house, I said slowly, understanding dawning like a headache. But the cancer treatments, she couldn't keep up with the payments. Marcus's voice cut through my thoughts. David, there's more. Kevin's been in contact with someone at Riverside Community Hospital. Based on his search history, I think he's trying to get information about your mother's prognosis. If she dies within the next 2 years, the life insurance payout could be contested based on the policy's suicide clause. Suicide clause? Sarah looked up from her laptop. But she has cancer. Doesn't matter. If Kevin can prove she knew about the diagnosis when she took out the policy and deliberately concealed it, he can argue that any action that hastened her death, including refusing treatment due to cost, constitutes a form of suicide. The room was spinning now. I gripped the edge of my desk, trying to process what Marcus was telling me. So if my mother dies, Kevin gets $2 million, and I get stuck with $340,000 in debt? That's the worst-case scenario, yes. But David, there's something else. Something I probably shouldn't have found. I closed my eyes. Just tell me. Your mother's been liquidating assets for months. Small stuff, jewelry, electronics, furniture. But she's been depositing the money into a separate account. A college fund account. Sarah looked up sharply. For Jessica. That's my guess. The account has about $12,000 in it so far. Not much, but for someone living on target wages while paying for chemo. Marcus trailed off. My phone buzzed with another text from Jessica, asterisk Mr. Chen, I'm sorry to bother you again, but I wanted you to know, your mom collapsed at work yesterday. She's okay, but they sent her to the hospital for dehydration. She made me promise not to tell you, but I thought you should know, asterisk. The message included a photo, my mother in a hospital bed, looking smaller and frielier than I'd ever seen her. But she was smiling at something off camera, and for just a moment, I could see traces of the woman who used to read me bedtime stories before everything went wrong. The auction is tomorrow morning, Sarah said quietly. And if Kevin's building a legal case, buying that house might be exactly what he's hoping for, Marcus added. It could be seen as you taking on responsibility for the trust's obligations. I stared at the photo of my mother, then at the legal documents spread across my desk, then at the view of a city where I built something she said I'd never be capable of building. Sir. Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. What do you want to do? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was already spreading beyond my ability to contain it. In 18 hours, the house would be sold to someone else. In 18 months, my mother would probably be dead. And somewhere in between, I had to decide whether the woman who'd called me a mistake deserved to be saved by the success that mistake had built. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Kevin's name. Interesting timing, Marcus muttered through the speaker. I looked at Sarah, who nodded once. Whatever Kevin wanted, we were about to find out together. I answered the call. Hello, Kevin. David. Jesus, I wasn't sure you'd pick up. Kevin's voice carried that same forced joviality I remembered from family dinners, back when we pretended to be a normal blended family. Listen, I know this is awkward, given everything with your mother and the divorce, but we need to talk. I put the call on speaker and gestured for Sarah to keep taking notes. Marcus was still connected on the other line, probably recording everything. What do you want, Kevin? Look, I know how that sounds, but hear me out. I've been trying to clean up some loose ends from the divorce, and I discovered something that affects you directly. His tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. Did Linda ever tell you about the Chin Family Trust? I'm aware of it now. I kept my voice neutral, watching Sarah pull up the trust documents on her screen. Then you know you're listed as the successor trustee. What you probably don't know is that Linda used your name and credit history to secure some of the initial funding. My blood went cold. What are you talking about? She forged your signature on 3 different loan applications, David. Used your social security number, your business address, even listed Chin Digital Solutions as collateral for one of them. Kevin's voice carried what sounded like genuine concern, but I'd learned not to trust his performances. The total exposure is close to $600,000. Sarah's fingers had stopped moving across her keyboard. She looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between panic and fury. That's impossible, I said. I would have been notified. Credit alerts, background checks for business licenses. She's been intercepting the correspondence. Had all the notices sent to a PO. Box in Riverside registered under Chin Family Holdings. I only found out because one of the creditors called me directly, thinking I might still have financial responsibility as her ex-husband. Marcus's voice cut in from the other line. Kevin, this is Marcus Webb, Chin Digital Security Consultant. Can you provide documentation for these claims? Who the hell, David, are you recording this? Answer his question, Kevin. A long pause. I can email you copies of everything I've found. Bank statements, loan applications, correspondence from creditors. But David, you need to understand, I'm not the bad guy here. I'm trying to help you before this gets worse. What do you want? I asked again. I want to buy that house tomorrow. The false concern dropped from his voice entirely. Cash offer, 15% above market value. You stay away from the auction, I'll make sure all of Linda's debt obligations disappear. Clean slate. Sarah was shaking her head vigorously, but I needed to hear the rest of Kevin's proposal. And if I don't? Then you'll spend the next 5 years in litigation while your mother's creditors come after your business assets. Even if you eventually prove the signatures were forged, the legal fees alone will cost you more than the house is worth. His voice turned cold. Plus, there's the matter of the life insurance policy. If Linda dies while owing money to creditors who can prove fraud, that $2 million gets tied up in probate indefinitely. The pieces were clicking into place. Kevin wasn't just trying to steal money from my dying mother, he was trying to trap me in a financial nightmare that would take years to untangle. I need proof of these loan documents, I said. Check your email in 10 minutes. But David, the auction starts at 10 a.m. tomorrow. If you show up, if you bid on that house, you're accepting legal responsibility for everything Linda has done in your name. The line went dead. Sarah looked up from her laptop, her face grim. Sir, if he's telling the truth about the forged documents. Then my mother just handed Kevin the perfect weapon to destroy us both. The email arrived exactly 10 minutes later, and each document felt like a punch to the gut. Loan application after loan application, all bearing what looked like my signature, my social security number, my business information. The handwriting analysis would take days, but even I could see the subtle differences in the pen strokes. She practiced, Sarah said quietly, examining the signatures on her screen. Look at this one from March, it's shaky, uncertain. But by June, it's almost perfect. Marcus had pulled the documents into some kind of analysis software. David, the good news is that these are definitely forgeries. The pressure patterns are wrong, the spacing is inconsistent. Any decent handwriting expert could prove it in court. And the bad news? The bad news is that Kevin's right about the litigation timeline. Even with clear evidence of forgery, unwinding this mess could take 3 to 5 years. And in the meantime, the creditors have legal standing to freeze your business accounts pending investigation. I walked to my office window, staring down at the city that suddenly felt less like a kingdom I'd built and more like a house of cards waiting to collapse. 43 million in company assets, and my dying mother's desperation could bring it all crashing down. My phone buzzed with another text from Jessica, Mr. Chen, I hope it's okay that I'm texting again. Your mom asked me to send you this, asterisk. The attached photo showed a cardboard box labeled, David's Things, in my mother's handwriting. Inside, I could see my old programming books, a trophy from the state science fair, and what looked like printed screenshots of every article ever written about Chin Digital Solutions. Asterisk, she keeps this box next to her bed. Says she's been saving everything about you since you left for college. She wanted you to know she kept track, even when she wasn't allowed to be proud out loud, asterisk. Sarah was reading over my shoulder. Sir, there's something else we need to discuss. The timeline. She pulled up a calendar on her tablet. If your mother's prognosis is accurate, 18 months with treatment, and if Kevin successfully contests the life insurance policy, then every day we delay gives him more opportunity to build his case. Meaning that buying the house tomorrow might actually be our best strategic move. If we can prove that your mother established the trust and took out the loan specifically to help that girl Jessica, it changes the legal framework entirely. Marcus's voice crackled through the speaker, Sarah's right. Fraud charges require proving intent to deceive for personal gain. But if Linda was using the money to help someone else, essentially using her own son's credit to create a scholarship fund, that's a very different kind of case. I thought about Jessica's coding project, about the $12,000 my mother had scraped together from selling her possessions. About a 17-year-old girl who reminded her of the son she'd driven away. There's something else, I said, remembering a detail from my mother's phone call. She said Jessica helps her carry groceries but won't take money for it. What if my mother's been trying to help her indirectly? Setting up college funds, planning for her grandmother's medical care. Using your credit because she knew she was dying and wouldn't live long enough to pay it back herself, Sarah finished. It's still fraud, but it's fraud with a clear beneficiary who isn't your mother. My desk phone rang. The caller ID showed Riverside Community Hospital. Mr. Chin. This is Dr. Patricia Williams. I'm calling about your mother, Linda Chin. She's asked me to contact you regarding her treatment options. I put the call on speaker. Is she all right? She's stable, but we need to discuss her care plan. Mr. Chen, your mother has been skipping chemotherapy sessions due to cost concerns. The treatments she needs aren't fully covered by her insurance, and she's been trying to pay out of pocket. How much are we talking about? For the complete treatment protocol, approximately $90,000 over the next year. But Mr. Chen, there's something else. Your mother has requested that we provide detailed financial documentation showing exactly where every dollar of her medical expenses has gone. Sarah looked up sharply. That wasn't the request of someone trying to hide financial fraud, it was the request of someone trying to prove their intentions. Doctor, has anyone else been asking about my mother's treatment? Her ex-husband, perhaps. A pause. I can't discuss specific inquiries due to privacy regulations, but I can say that we've had several calls asking about her prognosis and treatment costs. Your mother specifically asked that all medical information be shared only with you. After I hung up, the three of us sat in silence. The auction was 16 hours away. Kevin's ultimatum was clear, stay away and let him clean up the mess, or show up and accept responsibility for what might be $600,000 in fraudulent debt. But there was a third option forming in my mind, one that would require me to trust the woman who'd spent my childhood teaching me that trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. Sarah, can you get me a meeting with our legal team? Tonight? Of course. What are you planning? I looked at the photo Jessica had sent, my mother's collection of articles and achievements, carefully preserved in a box she kept beside her hospital bed. I'm going to buy that house tomorrow. But first, I'm going to make sure Kevin understands exactly what he's up against. The meeting with our legal team ran until 3 in the morning, but by the time I stumbled back to my apartment, we had a strategy. It was risky, potentially catastrophic, but it was the only play that didn't involve either abandoning my mother or handing Kevin exactly what he wanted. At 9:47 a.m., I stood outside the Riverside County Courthouse, watching a small crowd gather for the foreclosure auction. Kevin was there, looking confident in an expensive suit I probably could have bought him during our brief period as a family. He saw me and his face shifted from surprise to something much darker. David. I really hoped you'd be smarter than this. Kevin. I nodded to Sarah, who was standing beside me with 2 lawyers and a briefcase full of documents we'd spent the night preparing. I brought some friends. The auctioneer began the proceedings at exactly 10 o'clock. We're here for the foreclosure auction of 1247 Maple Street. Opening bid is $240,000. Kevin raised his hand immediately. 240. 260, I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. Kevin's jaw tightened. 300. 350. The small crowd of investors who'd shown up looking for a deal began whispering among themselves. This was already well above market value, and we were just getting started. 400,000, Kevin said, his voice sharp with irritation. 500. That got everyone's attention. Sarah squeezed my arm. We discussed going up to 600 if necessary, but every dollar over market value was money I might never recover if our legal strategy failed. Kevin stepped closer to me, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You're making a mistake, David. I have enough documentation to bury you in court for the next decade. Actually, Kevin, that's interesting you should mention documentation. I nodded to one of our lawyers, who stepped forward with a manila envelope. Kevin Watanabe. You're being served with a cease and desist order regarding your harassment of Linda Chen and her medical care providers. You're also being notified that Chen Digital Solutions will be filing criminal fraud charges related to your attempts to illegally obtain confidential medical information. Kevin's face went white. What the hell are you talking about? Marcus is very good at his job, I said quietly. Did you really think we wouldn't notice you bribing a hospital clerk to access my mother's records? Or that we wouldn't trace the payments back to your consulting company? The auctioneer called for attention. Do I have any other bids above 500,000? Kevin looked around frantically, probably calculating whether he could afford to go higher while facing potential criminal charges. 520, he said weakly. 600,000, I replied. Sold to bidder number 7 for $600,000. As the crowd dispersed, Kevin grabbed my arm. You have no idea what you just bought yourself into, David. That house comes with more problems than you can imagine. Such as? Ask your mother about the basement, and what she buried down there when you were 12. His smile was ugly, triumphant. Ask her why she really never wanted you going down there alone. He walked away before I could respond, but his words hit me like a physical blow. I remembered being 12, remembered asking about the locked door in our basement, remembered my mother's sharp reaction when she caught me trying to pick the lock. Sarah appeared at my elbow. Sir. The paperwork's ready for your signature. I signed the documents in a daze, officially becoming the owner of the house where I'd learned to hate myself. $600,000, more than twice what it was worth, for a building full of memories I'd spent 15 years trying to forget. There's one more thing, Sarah said as we walked back to the car. Jessica texted while you were signing. Your mother wants to see you. Today. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, *, congratulations on the house, son. Now we need to talk about why I really called you. It wasn't just about the cancer. Mom *. The drive to Riverside Community Hospital felt longer than the 47 minutes my GPS claimed it would take. Sarah had offered to come with me, but this conversation needed to happen alone. I bought back my childhood home for $600,000, exposed Kevin's illegal activities to law enforcement, and potentially saved Jessica's college fund, but my mother's final text suggested none of that was why she'd really called. *, now we need to talk about why I really called you. It wasn't just about the cancer, *. The words had been cycling through my head since I'd read them 3 hours ago. What could be worse than forging loan documents in my name? What had Kevin meant about the basement? I found my mother in room 314, looking smaller than she had in the photo Jessica sent. The chemo had taken her hair, but someone had given her a soft blue scarf that made her eyes look less hollow. She was sitting up in bed, picking at a meal that looked like it belonged in a middle school cafeteria. You came, she said, setting down her plastic fork. You bought a house today. Our house. I bought it to keep Kevin from getting it. I pulled the visitor's chair closer to her bed. Mom, what did he mean about the basement? Her face went through several expressions in quick succession: surprise, fear, resignation, and something that might have been relief. How much did he tell you? Just that you buried something down there when I was 12. Something you didn't want me to find. I studied her face, looking for the tells I'd learned to read in childhood. What's down there, Mom? She closed her eyes and leaned back against her pillows. Your father's letters. What letters? Dad left when I was 2. I don't remember him ever. He didn't leave, David. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I made him go away. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to process what she just said. Your father, Marcus Chen, he wanted to be part of your life. He sent letters every month for 10 years. Birthday cards, Christmas presents, school supplies when he found out you were interested in computers. She opened her eyes and looked directly at me for the first time since I'd arrived. I kept them all in a metal box in the basement. I told myself I'd give them to you when you turned 18, when you were old enough to understand. My mouth felt dry. But you didn't. But I didn't. Because by the time you were 18, you hated me so much that finding out I'd kept your father from you would have killed any chance we might have had to fix things someday. I stood up abruptly, walking to the window that looked out over the hospital parking lot. Somewhere out there, normal people were living normal lives, dealing with normal family problems that didn't require forensic accountants and criminal fraud investigations. How many letters? I asked. 43. The last one came 6 months after you left for college. He said he understood why you might not want contact with him, but if you ever changed your mind. She trailed off. David, he's been paying into a college fund for you since you were 3 years old. Even after you graduated, even after you became successful, he's been adding money every month. The number hit me like a physical blow. How much? As of last month. About $230,000. I turned back to face her. Kevin knows about this. Kevin knows about everything. He found the letters when we were packing to move in together after we got married. I begged him not to tell you, promised him anything if he'd just let me handle it in my own time. Her voice cracked. That's how he controlled me for 6 years, David. Every time I wanted to call you, every time I tried to reach out, he'd threatened to tell you the truth. The pieces were clicking together. That's why you set up the trust. You were trying to give the money to Jessica because you couldn't figure out how to give it to me. The cancer changes everything. I don't have time to find the right words anymore, or wait for the perfect moment. She reached for a tissue from the bedside table. Your father's number is in my phone. Marcus Chen, listed under emergency contact. He lives in Portland now, works as a software engineer for Nike. He's remarried, has 2 daughters, but he asks about you every time we talk. You talk to him? Every few months. I call him when the guilt gets too heavy to carry alone. She looked down at her hands. He knows about the cancer. He wanted to fly down here immediately, but I made him promise to wait until I'd talk to you first. My phone was buzzing with notifications, probably Sarah checking on me, maybe Marcus with updates on Kevin's legal situation, possibly Jessica with more photos of my mother's secret shrine to my success. But all I could think about was a man I barely remembered who'd been trying to reach me for 26 years. Where are the letters now? Still in the basement. Kevin never found the exact hiding place, behind the water heater, in a gap between the foundation and the wall. She managed a weak smile. You always were good at finding hiding places. I figured if anyone ever discovered them, it would be you. I sat back down in the chair, my mind racing through implications and possibilities. Mom, the money Dad's been saving, does Kevin know about that account? Her expression shifted to something sharper, more focused. Why? Because if Kevin's planning to contest your life insurance policy, and if he doesn't know about Dad's money, then we might have just found the funding source to save Jessica's scholarship and pay for your medical treatment. For the first time since I'd walked into the room, my mother looked like the woman who'd raised me, calculating, strategic, fierce when it mattered. David, she said slowly, what exactly are you planning? What I'm planning, I said, pulling out my phone, is to call my father for the first time in 32 years and ask him if he wants to help me save the family that kept us apart. My mother's face went pale. David, you can't just. Mom, in the last 24 hours, I've discovered that my dying mother forged my signature on $600,000 in loans, my ex-stepfather is trying to steal your life insurance money, and the father I thought abandoned me has been setting aside college money for 3 decades. I scrolled through her contacts until I found, emergency contact, Marcus Chen. I think we're way past normal family etiquette. Before I could lose my nerve, I pressed call. It rang twice before a voice I didn't recognize answered. Linda. Is everything okay? This isn't Linda, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. This is David. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, Jesus. David. Hold on, let me. I could hear him moving, probably finding somewhere private to talk. I've been hoping for this call for 26 years. Well, it's not exactly a social call. I looked at my mother, who was gripping her blanket so tightly her knuckles had gone white. I need to ask you about the money you've been saving. And I need to know if you're willing to help me solve what might be the most complicated family crisis in recorded history. Marcus Chen, my father, laughed, and the sound was startlingly familiar. Son, I'm a software engineer. Complicated problems are what I do for a living. Tell me everything. So I did. The cancer diagnosis, Kevin's blackmail scheme, the forged loan documents, Jessica's scholarship, the house I just bought for twice its value, and the metal box hidden behind the water heater that contained 30 years of letters I'd never received. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. David, the college account actually has $273,000 in it as of this morning. I've been adding extra since Linda told me about the cancer. My mother started crying, soft, broken sounds that made something crack in my chest. There's something else, he continued. I know about Kevin's legal problems. I've been having him investigated for the past 6 months. You what? Linda called me when he started pressuring her about the life insurance policy. I hired a private investigator in California. Kevin's been running similar schemes on at least 3 other divorced women with terminal diagnoses. His voice hardened. David, your stepfather is what we call a grief predator. He specifically targets dying women with assets and manipulates them into financial arrangements that benefit him. I sank back into my chair. How many others? For confirmed cases, probably more. He's made over $6 million in the last 8 years using variations of this same playbook. Papers rustled in the background. The FBI has been building a case against him for 2 years. Your mother's situation might be the evidence they need to finally arrest him. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, * Kevin just showed up at the office asking to speak with you. Security won't let him up, but he's not leaving, *. I showed the message to my mother, whose tears had stopped. She looked almost satisfied. Mom, what did you do? She reached for her own phone, scrolling to a voice recording app. I may have mentioned to Kevin that you bought the house specifically to access the basement. And I may have suggested that once you found your father's letters, you discover some things about our marriage that Kevin wouldn't want made public. What things? Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Nothing, actually. But Kevin doesn't know that. He's probably panicking, thinking there's evidence of his financial manipulation hidden somewhere in that house. My father's voice crackled through the phone speaker. David, how fast can you get to the house? Because if Kevin's desperate enough to confront you at your office, he's probably desperate enough to try breaking into the basement tonight. The drive from Riverside back to my childhood home took 43 minutes, but it felt like hours. Sarah had texted 3 more updates. Kevin had finally left the office but was spotted at a hardware store buying bolt cutters and a crowbar. Marcus was en route from Portland with copies of all the financial documents my father had been collecting. And Jessica was at the house, waiting with the key I'd asked the real estate agent to give her. I pulled into the driveway of 1247 Maple Street at 7:23 p.m., just as the sun was setting behind the neighbor's oak tree that had grown at least 10 feet since I'd lived here. The house looked smaller than I remembered, shabbier, but Jessica had turned on the porch light and it looked almost welcoming. She met me at the front door, holding a manila envelope. Mr. Chen, I hope it's okay that I got here early. Your mom asked me to give you this before you go down to the basement. The envelope contained a single sheet of paper in my mother's handwriting. David, your father's phone number is 503-555-7824. The letters are behind the water heater in a blue metal toolbox. The combination is August 15, 1990, your first day of kindergarten. I kept track of all your first days. I'm sorry I made you think I wasn't paying attention. Mom**. She also wanted me to tell you something else, Jessica said, following me through the living room toward the basement door. She said Kevin called her an hour ago, screaming about breach of trust and stolen property. She hung up on him, but she's worried he might do something stupid. The basement door was exactly where I remembered it, next to the kitchen pantry. The same cheap brass handle, the same creak on a third step down. But now I had the key, literally and figuratively, to the one room that had been off limits during my entire childhood. Jessica stayed upstairs while I made my way down the narrow wooden steps. The basement smelled like damp concrete and old paint, exactly like every suburban basement in America. But there, behind the water heater in a gap I never would have noticed as a child, was a blue metal toolbox covered in dust. My hands were shaking as I entered the combination. August 15, 1990, the day I'd worn my favorite dinosaur backpack and cried when my mother dropped me off at kindergarten. The day she promised she'd be waiting right there when school ended. The box opened with a soft click. 43 letters, arranged chronologically, each one carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. The first one was addressed to David Chen, age 3, in handwriting I didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar. Dear David, I know you won't be reading this for many years, but I wanted you to know that I think about you every single day. Your mother sent me a photo of you building a tower with blocks, and you look so serious and focused. I think you're going to build amazing things someday, I opened another one at random, dated for my 10th birthday, happy birthday, David. I enclosed a gift card for the computer store downtown. Your mother says you're teaching yourself to code, which doesn't surprise me at all. I was writing programs when I was your age too. Maybe it runs in the family, And another, from my senior year of high school, David, your mother tells me you got a full scholarship to Berkeley for computer science. I'm so proud I literally cried in the middle of a Starbucks. I've been saving money for your college expenses, but it sounds like you won't need it. I'll keep adding to the account anyway, in case you want to start a business someday or buy a house. Love, Dad*. That's when I heard the sound of breaking glass upstairs. Mr. Chen. Jessica's voice was sharp with panic. Someone just broke the kitchen window. I shoved the letters back in the box and took the stairs 3 at a time. Jessica was standing in the living room, pointing toward the kitchen where I could see glass scattered across the linoleum floor. A man's silhouette was climbing through the window frame. Kevin straightened up, brushing glass from his jacket sleeves. He was holding a flashlight in one hand and bolt cutters in the other, and his face had the wild expression of someone who'd finally run out of options. David. Perfect timing. His voice was too calm, too controlled. We need to have a conversation about what belongs to whom in this family. Get out of my house, Kevin. Your house. He laughed, but it sounded more like choking. This house is built on 30 years of lies, David. Everything you think you know about your family, about your mother, about why your father left, it's all bullshit. Jessica had positioned herself between Kevin and the front door, probably planning to run for help. But Kevin was blocking the path to the kitchen, and the basement stairs were behind me. Jessica, go outside and call 911, I said quietly. Nobody's calling anyone, Kevin said, raising the bolt cutters. Not until we settle this like adults. David, do you want to know why your mother really kept those letters from you? I already know about the letters. Do you know about the restraining order? His smile was ugly, triumphant. Do you know your precious father was arrested for stalking when you were 8 years old? That he showed up at your school, at your mother's work, that he threatened to take you away from her? The words hit me like a physical blow, but I forced my voice to stay steady. You're lying. Am I? He pulled out his phone, scrolling to what looked like a scanned document. Riverside County Court, case number 04-7823. Marcus Chen vs. Linda Chen, restraining order granted September 15, 1998. My phone was buzzing in my pocket, probably my father calling back, probably Sarah with updates, probably my mother asking if I'd found the letters. But all I could focus on was the document Kevin was showing me, and the possibility that everything I'd learned today was just another layer of lies. That's when we heard the sirens approaching. Jessica had called 911 anyway. Through the broken kitchen window, I could see red and blue lights painting the neighbor's fence in alternating colors. Kevin's face shifted from triumphant to panicked in the span of a heartbeat. You stupid little bitch, he snarled at Jessica, who stood her ground despite being half his size. The stupid little bitch who's been recording this entire conversation, she said, holding up her phone. Including the part where you admitted to breaking and entering with burglar tools. 2 police officers appeared at the front door simultaneously with 2 more climbing through the kitchen window Kevin had shattered. The lead officer, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and tired eyes, looked around the room and sighed. Let me guess. Family dispute. Officer Martinez, Jessica said, apparently recognizing her. This man broke into Mr. Chen's house and threatened us with bolt cutters. He's also been harassing Mr. Chen's mother at the hospital. Kevin started talking fast. Officers, there's been a misunderstanding. I have legal documentation proving that property in this house belongs to me. These people are trying to steal. Sir, put the bolt cutters down and step away from the minor. Officer Martinez's voice carried the authority of someone who'd handled this exact scenario too many times. Now. Kevin dropped the tools and raised his hands, but his eyes never left mine. David, that restraining order is real. Your father isn't the man you think he is. Kevin Watanabe. The second officer was consulting something on his phone. We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with elder fraud and identity theft. The room went silent except for the static from the police radios. Kevin's face went white. That's impossible. I haven't. You've been under federal investigation for 8 months, Mr. Watanabe. The FBI task force asked us to bring you in for questioning. Officer Martinez was pulling out handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. As they read Kevin his rights, my phone finally rang. My father's number. David? I just got a call from Linda. She said Kevin broke into the house. I stepped onto the front porch, away from the chaos inside. Dad, I need you to tell me about the restraining order. From 1998. A long pause. Jesus. He told you about that. Is it real? It's real. His voice was heavy with something that sounded like shame. David, I made some very bad decisions when you were little. I was young and angry and I couldn't understand why Linda wouldn't let me see you. My chest felt tight. What did you do? I followed her to work. Showed up at your school during pickup time. Called her house at all hours demanding to talk to you. He was quiet for a moment. I never would have hurt you or her, but I was. I was obsessive about it. Desperate. Through the front window, I could see the officers leading Kevin toward their patrol car. Jessica was showing them something on her phone, probably the recording she'd made. The restraining order was for 2 years, my father continued. But by the time it expired, Linda had moved you both across town and changed her phone number. I hired a lawyer, but he said forcing visitation with a parent who didn't want contact could be traumatic for you. So you just gave up? No. I started writing letters instead. I figured when you turned 18, you could decide for yourself whether you wanted a relationship with me. His voice cracked slightly. I never imagined Linda was keeping them from you. Officer Martinez appeared at the front door. Mr. Chin. We'll need a statement about tonight's break-in. But first, there's someone on the phone who wants to speak with you. She handed me a police radio. This is Special Agent Sarah Kim with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Mr. Chen, Kevin Watanabe has been the subject of a federal investigation for the past 18 months. Your mother's case was the missing piece we needed to establish a pattern of elder abuse. Is she in legal trouble? For the forged loan documents? Mr. Watanabe coerced her into those forgeries using blackmail and threats. She's a victim, not a perpetrator. However, we'll need her testimony to ensure he's convicted on all charges. Jessica appeared beside me, still holding her phone. Mr. Chen, your mom called. She wants to know if you're okay, and she said to tell you something. What? She said the restraining order expired in 2000, but she kept telling your dad you didn't want contact because she was afraid he'd find out what kind of mother she'd become. Jessica's voice was soft. She said she was protecting him from her mistakes, not protecting you from him. My father was still on the phone, probably hearing every word through the radio static. David, his voice came through tinny but clear, I know this is a lot to process. But if you're willing, I'd like to drive down there tonight. Not to complicate things, just to finally meet my son. I looked back at the house where I'd spent my childhood feeling unwanted, then at Jessica who was texting rapidly on her phone, probably updating my mother on everything that had happened. Dad, I said into the radio, room 314 at Riverside Community Hospital. I think it's time you and Mom had a conversation too. The hospital waiting room at 11:47 p.m. was a special kind of purgatory, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of disinfectant mixed with burnt coffee, and 3 generations of the Chin family scattered across plastic chairs like survivors of some bizarre emotional shipwreck. My father had arrived 2 hours ago, looking older than I'd expected but with eyes that were unmistakably familiar when I looked in mirrors. We'd exchanged maybe 50 words total, both of us seeming to understand that 30 years of absence couldn't be bridged with small talk in a hospital corridor. Jessica was curled up in the corner chair, finally asleep after the adrenaline of Kevin's arrest had worn off. She'd refused to go home until she knew my mother was stable. The stress of the day had triggered another episode of dehydration that landed her back in the ER. David, my father said quietly, there's something else I need to tell you before we go in there. I looked up from the financial documents Sarah had couriered over, loan papers, trust agreements, and a preliminary damage assessment that put Kevin's fraud at close to $800,000 across multiple victims. Jesus, Dad. How many more family secrets are there? Just one. He pulled a worn envelope from his jacket pocket. This came last week. From Linda. The letter was handwritten on hospital stationery, dated 5 days ago. Asterisk Marcus, I need to tell you something I should have said 26 years ago. The real reason I kept you away wasn't because I was afraid of you. It was because David started asking questions when he turned 12. Questions about why you left, why you never called, whether you ever loved him. And I realized I had 2 choices, let him hate you for abandoning him, or let him hate me for driving you away. I chose to be the villain in his story because I thought it would hurt less than knowing his father fought for him and lost, asterisk. Asterisk I made him believe you didn't want him because I couldn't face telling him I was the reason you couldn't have him. I'm telling you now because the cancer has made me brave about things I used to be coward about. And because our son deserves to know that he was wanted by at least one of his parents, asterisk. Linda. My hands were shaking as I finished reading. She sent this last week. 3 days before she started calling you. He folded the letter carefully. David, she didn't reach out to you because she was dying. She reached out because she finally worked up the courage to tell the truth. Through the waiting room windows, I could see the sun starting to rise over Riverside. Sarah would be at the office in 3 hours, probably fielding calls from reporters who'd gotten wind of Kevin's arrest. Jessica's grandmother Rosa was being discharged from rehabilitation this afternoon, her care fully funded by what my father was calling a family scholarship endowment. The house on Maple Street was mine, officially and legally, along with 43 letters I still hadn't finished reading. But right now, all of that felt secondary to the conversation I was about to have with a woman who'd spent my entire childhood protecting me from the knowledge that I was loved. Mr. Chin. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Your mother is awake. She's asking for both of you. Jessica stirred in her chair as we stood up. Is she okay? She's stable. But she specifically asked that you come too, honey. She said she has something important to tell all three of you. My father caught my arm as we walked toward room 314. David, whatever she says in there, remember that she's been carrying this alone for 30 years. She's not the same person who raised you. Neither am I replied, pushing open the door to face whatever final revelation my mother had been saving for last. My mother looked smaller in the hospital bed than she had 12 hours ago, but her eyes were clearer than I'd seen them since childhood. She was holding Jessica's hand with her left hand and had reached for my father's with her right the moment we walked in. Marcus, she said, her voice stronger than I expected. Thank you for coming. Linda. My father's voice was gentle. How are you feeling? Like I'm finally ready to stop lying. She looked at me, then at Jessica, then back at my father. I asked all of you to be here because I need witnesses to what I'm about to say. And because the three people in this room are the only family I have left. Jessica squeezed her hand. Mrs. Chen, you don't have to. Yes, I do. My mother's voice carried a strength I remembered from when I was very small, before everything went wrong. David, do you want to know why I really called you a mistake all those years? I sat down in the chair beside her bed. I think I already know. No, you don't. She smiled, and for a moment I could see traces of the young woman who'd raised me alone for so many years. I called you a mistake because you were the best thing I ever did, and I was terrified I'd ruin you the way I ruined everything else. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? You were brilliant, David. From the time you could walk, you were solving problems, building things, asking questions I didn't know how to answer. She looked at my father. You got that from Marcus. The curiosity, the determination, the refusal to accept that something couldn't be done. My father wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. But I was 23 and scared and alone, and every day you got smarter, I got more afraid that you'd realize I wasn't good enough to be your mother. Her voice cracked. So I convinced myself that if I could make you tough, if I could make you independent, you'd survive even if I failed you. Jessica was crying silently. Mrs. Chin. The mistake wasn't you, David. The mistake was thinking that love meant pushing you away before you could leave on your own. She reached for my hand with trembling fingers. And the biggest mistake was waiting 34 years to tell you that I have been proud of you every single day since the moment you were born. I couldn't speak. Couldn't think. Could barely breathe. Marcus, she continued, turning to my father, I stole 30 years from both of you because I was too proud to admit I needed help raising him. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover that kind of damage. My father shook his head. Linda, we both made mistakes. No. Her voice was firm. You fought for him. I fought against everyone, including my own son. There's a difference. She looked at Jessica, who was openly sobbing now. And you, sweet girl. You remind me every day of who David could have been if he'd had a mother who built him up instead of tearing him down. You're going to do extraordinary things, and you're going to do them knowing you're loved unconditionally. The room was quiet except for the sound of Jessica crying and the steady beep of my mother's heart monitor. I'm grateful you called me a mistake, Mom, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Because it made me determined to prove that some mistakes turn out to be the best things that ever happened. My mother smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her in decades. Now that, she said, is exactly the kind of thing my brilliant son would say. For the first time in 34 years, I believed she meant it.